Welcome to the Witcher Lorecast, the show that explores the vast lore behind the Witcher games, show, and books. All right, Witchers, welcome back to the Witcher Lorecast. This is your host, Tom, or Robots, and I'm here with Toasty. Toasty's in a mood today because he's not putting up with my shenanigans. Not at all.
When do I ever is the real question.
Yeah, sometimes more than others. Sometimes more than others. But this is why you need to show up for our pre-show. But if you aren't here for the pre-show, then welcome anyway. Thank you for joining us. Today we're talking about a very important location for the elves. We teased it a little bit last time. Toasty, where are you taking us today? You're like our tour guide. Where are we going on our tour today?
Well, Tom, we're going to Dol Blathanna, or the Valley of the Flowers.
We're going to go visit. We're going to go pick some flowers. Mm-hmm. We're going to be one with nature. I'm sure this is a very peaceful location. Lots of peace and happiness happens here. And that's what it's all about. That's what the Witcher world is about, if you haven't noticed yet.
Yeah. Honestly, it's not that bad. Other than, King Demavend coming in and like storming them every so often. Frequent raids, that's just how it is.
Yeah. Other than the raids and war and murder stuff that happens in and around the location, it's totally peaceful.
Or over the location.
Yeah. So totally fine. So, so kick us off. So obviously this is a very important place for the elves. It's a location that's already come up in the TV show as well. Yep. So if you're paying attention to that, then you've heard the name Dol Blathanna. So what's the deal with that? How do we start this off?
So I got a little excerpt from The Witcher 2. In the Elven tongue, Dol Blathanna means the Valley of the Flowers. Anyone who sees this land with their own eyes would admit to the aptness of this poetic name. Once the southern-easternmost province of the Kingdom of Aedirn, it became the sole and sovereign realm of the Free Elves following the last war against Nilfgaard, when Emperor Emir var Emrys gave the elves these lands in return for their wartime service. Dol Blathanna is ruled by the elven sorceress Francesca Findabair, also known as Enid ad Glena, the Daisy of the Valley. It remains a thorn in the side of neighboring realms, even though its queen has been forced to distance herself officially from the guerrilla war waged by the Scoia'tael.
Okay, so right off the bat, we know that the elves are going to get this land back. If you're only up to season 2 of the Witcher TV show, that if they do follow the books, the elves get this area back, right? Because this is important to them. Secondly, I didn't realize Francesca Findabair, also known as Daisy of the Valley, she's like a flower too. She's all about peace.
Yep.
That's what flowers are meaning. That's how that works.
Yeah. I don't actually know. I know there's because different flowers mean like different things, right? I don't actually know what a daisy means.
Probably peace.
Probably. She really living up to her name in season 2.
Yeah. So interesting. So we're getting a little spoilery for the way the books play out compared to the TV show. Now that doesn't mean that the TV show is going to keep to all of these things. Obviously, they changed some stuff. So we'll have to see.
We know that. They're keeping generally in line. Nilfgaard's allying with the elves, which is accurate. So we know that something's happening there that's, following so far, but they have changed a few things. So who really knows? So the Dol Blathanna is bordered on the north by Kaidwen and the Blue Mountains to the east. It belonged to the elves for ages until humans came and laid claim to the land about 100 years ago, and the elves fled to the mountains. So
this is 100 years before the events of the books, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Dol Blathanna is a freehold duchy nowadays under the overarching rule of Aedirn, formerly an independent kingdom. That was generally right before Nilfgaard stuff that we see in Witcher 2. Mm-hmm. And so this is what they are before the second Nilfgaardian War. And it uses an elective monarchy form of government. Most recent ruler was the sorceress Francesca Findebar. After the events of The Witcher 2/3, they don't really mention it as much on The Witcher 3, so it's not like we don't have a lot of details of what's happening with it now.
Right. So in the games being the most recent part of the story. And we've mentioned this on previous episodes. The books happen and then the games happen. So if we refer to this happened in The Witcher 2, that means you're already after the events of the books.
Yep. Its capital is the palace known as the Silver Towers. So it's not really like they don't have a city that rules it. It's kind of its own like place. And so the Silver Towers is just like kind of a castle.
It's just like one location.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's not even like it's like just a palace that they rule from, essentially. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if Tom wants to bring this up for our live stream viewers. We got the coat of arms and the banner. And
here, let me stretch this out. So this is the coat of arms. And you can see again the flowers. You got daisies. Mm-hmm. Daisies for peace and arrows for transporting peace through the air.
Into the throats of their enemies.
Into the throats of their enemies. Yes. Yep. Yes. Mm-hmm. And then the shield, there's a shield here with, again, daisies and arrows crossed on the front. All of these are like a very medium green. Like when you think of the color green, this is probably the green you think of. And then yellow and white for the daisies and the shafts of the arrows. So cool.
For locations, Dol Blathanna is kind of divided into two different kind of areas as far as we see. We have the Upper Posada. Its inhabitants are simple folk. If the aldermen in the short story Edge of the World is an example, not far away is the Lower Posada, where people seem to take a more hands-on approach to their pest control.
Wait, what is that a reference to their pest control?
So we'll talk about it a bit later on. One of the short stories in The Last Wish takes place. We mentioned it last week with Teruviel, where Geralt gets hired to deal with a devil, and
that's the type of pest.
Yes, and they had like a book that told them the different ways that they could get rid of a devil, and it was very outdated. It didn't exactly work. It just made Teruviel a little angry, and it was a bit. Actually, it was just incredibly silly, the solutions that they had. So, but they tried before they hired a Witcher to actually do it. Much to Geralt's disdain, he doesn't like it when people try to deal with their stuff before asking.
Yeah,
they usually make it worse.
Yeah, I totally understand that. Yeah.
When it isn't being terrorized by Nan the Hag, the area is allegedly plagued by a variety of creatures, or were-things, as the locals call them, including banes, elves, flying drakes.
Wait. Elves are on the list?
Elves are on the list. That's what the people think.
I guess it depends on your perspective, right?
Yeah. Flying drakes, giant pikes, hobalds, imps, mamoons, miskeeds, and myriapodons.
Man, we got to catch up on some of these with the Bestiary episodes.
Some of these are just like names that are mentioned and they don't actually ever come up.
Maybe we should do a patron episode where we pull out names of monsters that don't actually get descriptions anywhere. And then we design our own monsters. Like, what do you think is a mamoon? What is that? What does it look like? What does it do?
See, that's fair. And honestly, these could all be actual things that just got mislabeled. I mean, the Sylvan that was there, they called it a devil because it had horns. They're like, it's a devil. It was actually a Sylvan. So who really knows?
Good point.
I believe myriapodons are like legitimately a thing because I remember Geralt mentioning it like several times. It was like one of those things that never comes up except for him mentioning it on several occasions. The same as like scolopendromorphs.
Yeah.
Lower Posada is a hamlet not far from Upper Posada, and it is where Netley, a local farmer, lives in the short story "The Edge of the World."
Wait a minute. Did you just mess up a word?
Hide.
Just wondering.
I guess whatever. I'm already over this thing, whatever it is. I don't know what it
It's
is.
the words is hard button.
I'm already over it.
Whenever we mess up words all the time. So I figured we did deserve to have a words is hard button.
Oh, dear.
Yeah.
Okay.
Words is hard. So go on.
Dol Blathanna also has a strong connection to the goddess known as the Queen of the Fields, or Dana Mead. It's Meadbh. So pronounce that how you will.
I think this is the first time I've ever seen a word with a D and a B right next to each other. Db. Meadb.
Yeah.
Meadb.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like Dana Meeb or Mead. I'm not entirely sure. I'm not qualified in that language. And she actually makes a brief appearance in the same short story, The Edge of the World, which we'll do like a little bit of a summary, but we don't have to like go through it in immense detail.
Worth reading.
So,
yeah, it's worth reading. But yeah,
it's worth reading.
Summarize it a little bit. All right. Mm-hmm. Well, tell you what, now sounds like a good time for our mid-break before we get into more details. So how about we go do that? Mm-hmm. Here we go.
Very well. Let us get this over with. Something has infested my vineyard.
Mm-hmm. Great. Let me go prepare my something oil then.
This is going to be a quick mid-break because there's not a whole lot to report on this week. No new patrons, no new reviews and ratings, but we do have to take the time to thank our current patrons, all 16 of you. Thank you for being here. And our higher vampires, Ben of Temeria, Vita Bjornen, and Bane the Hospital Guy. Thank you so much for all of your support. We really do appreciate it. And if you are interested in checking out the Patreon, getting ad-free episodes, getting episodes early, getting shirts, getting stickers, getting the chance to join us on a patron episode at the end of every month, then go to patreon.com/Witcher Lorecast, where you can see all the different tiers and all the different stuff you can get. Also, if you want to help us out in other ways, leaving a rating or review would be awesome. It's been a few weeks since we've got one on Apple Podcasts, but if you listen on Apple, or if you just have an Apple account, leaving a review on there will get read out on the future episode, as long as you give us 5 stars. And then you can also leave some ratings on Spotify. So that's the best way to help us out with that stuff. Or if you have friends that are into The Witcher, tell them about the show. Bring them along. We'd love to have them. But that's what we got for the middle of the episode. We won't keep you any longer because we've got more Dol Blathanna to talk about. Here we go.
You smell of death and destiny, heroics and heartbreak.
It's onion.
Right, yeah.
So this is the part where we get to dive into the history, get a little bit more deep on what exactly is this place and why is it so important?
And actually, just a small note of the fact that audio clip right there is from the episode they did for the Netflix series that takes place in Dol Blathanna. So that is of that short story, The Edge of the World. So
nice. That
episode, if you're curious what Dol Blathanna looks like, it gives you a little bit. It's more the like peasant inhabited area because it's like crop fields and stuff. I imagine it's not just called the Valley of the Flowers and doesn't have any flowers. So,
right. Yeah.
But yeah, a lot of that's just, what you have to think of, or like different artwork and stuff. So as for the history of the area, the region, while originally held by elves, later fell to humans around the 1160s, and by the summer of 1267 was ruled over by a governor from Vengerberg, Adern.
Which makes sense because of the realm that it's a part of once it's brought into the human kingdom.
However, Emperor Emir Var Emreis of Nilfgaard, looking to take out the northern mages to prevent a humiliating defeat like during the First Northern War, enlisted the help of Francesca Findabair, promising to give her Dol Blathanna and make her queen. After the Thanad coup, while there were heavy casualties on all sides, Francesca was successful, and true to his word, the emperor made her queen, giving the elves a kingdom of their own.
That's actually a really nice thing. I mean, there's so much terribleness, and the leaders are often doing terrible things. The fact that Emir actually followed through with this It's pretty cool. Like Nilfgaard does a lot of bad stuff, but this part's actually good.
And we obviously know that they decided to take a much darker twist in the show. So where he just orders the death of her child and makes her go on a rampage on their own.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, there's obviously
he may
bad
or may
stuff.
not give her Dol Blathanna. I imagine they'll at least stick with that idea of like, if we get into that far into the series,
placate them, right?
He gives it back to them.
And especially if they don't realize that he's the one who set up the death of the child, like that stuff. Oh yeah, I'm not saying that like redeems him. It's just, it's worth noting. Ben says he's still an a-hole. Yes. But it's worth noting when there are like things that happen counter to what you would expect. Like the fact that he does follow through. This is kind of notable.
Yeah. However, this was short-lived. Following the Battle of Brenna in March of 1268, Nilfgaard once more suffered a devastating defeat, and by early April, meetings were held to hash out the terms of peace. Meanwhile, Aedern's king Dimavend III,
who we talked about, right?
Yep. Acknowledged the new land, but as a duchy rather than a kingdom, and requested he be paid tribute and that Dol Blathanna grant equal rights to humans and elves. Francesca, having heard all of this upstairs, the other Lodge of Sorceresses members.
Uh-oh. Yeah. I told you it would be useful.
Agreed to all of Dimavend's conditions except paying tribute, making Dol Blathanna a freehold and lowering her status to that of a duchess.
This is politics like 101 for medieval feudal society, right? This idea of like, are you a duchy or are you a kingdom? Are you on par with us? Can you become a vassal? All of that stuff. So basically he's like, no, you're not on par. You're of a duchy status. You still have a status, but you're of a duchy status, which means that you have to be underneath a kingdom. And so that's my kingdom because this is my land. And so you have to pay tribute to me, which is taxes and soldiers and all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Which, I mean, that's still like a huge step because, like, as we talked about in his episode, he hated elves. Like, he was an extreme like bigot in that, like, along with like Stregobor kind of levels of, but he, eventually like evolved, and
he knew a good deal when he saw one. Like he probably realized he couldn't keep them from having status at all. So he would take advantage of it.
Yep.
And force them into a situation where they have to pay tribute. They're still underneath him.
But they didn't have to, like, she didn't agree to pay tribute, but it seemed like that condition was still, like, they still agreed to all the other conditions, and she was fine with that. As long as they kept their land, she didn't really care. Dol Blathanna is only a mentioned location in Witcher 2. Iorveth claims that his people have no future there, despite being home for over 2,000 elves for the last 5 years since its formation into an elven state.
Iorveth is one of the main secondary characters, I guess you could say, in The Witcher 2. He's you end up siding with either him or what's the name of the other guy? Crap. This is pulling up names from old games.
The Temerian guy, right?
Yeah, the Temerian guy.
Roche. Vernon Roche.
Vernon Roche. Yeah, that's it. So they're two of the main other like characters you have to deal with, and he's an elf. So he basically is the side with the elves side.
Yep. Only a little over a dozen elven children have been born so far in it because most of its inhabitants are old and sterile, and Francesca Fenderbire is forced to abide by the Nilfgaardian Emperor's rules, which ordered her to sacrifice the Scoia'tael to their execution at the hands of the other northern monarchs.
Woof.
This is the main reason behind Iorveth's support for Saskia, the Virgin of Aedern. He believes that the Pontar Valley might be the first suitable place for elves to flourish and not be persecuted.
So his beliefs are that Dol Blathanna is kind of a waste of time.
It's kind of like a dead area, and that they need to move further north.
Yeah. They're too endangered here. It's too hot.
Which, newsflash, Aedard and Kaidwin are still fighting over that damn place. I don't think you want to move there.
Right. It's just
and then
as dangerous.
Sabrina, curse the land for all time. So you're going to have less success now for sure, because it's just a cursed land and they're probably still warring over it because they have for like all time.
Sounds about right.
Yeah. So, in as far as the Witcher cinematic universe goes, we get to see Dol Blathanna in the second episode of season 1. The episode that covers the short story, The Edge of the World.
This is the one where they come across the Sylvan, right? It's that one?
Yes.
With
Turuviel.
Where Geralt gets captured and he almost gets killed by
Filavandrel and his elves. So Turuviel was working to try and get resources for the elves because they're dying out essentially, right? Like where we're at in the story, they are struggling. They don't have like a place to call their own. They're persecuted pretty much everywhere else. So they're struggling to get like resources and things to survive. Turuviel was. And
they don't even know if they can have kids yet at this point.
Yeah, well, they know that. I mean, they're under the impression that they can't,
right?
Because like they know that they haven't. An elven child has not been born for like probably decades or something. Like they didn't. I don't think they gave a concrete timeline, but like I know Francesca, I believe she says she's miscarried 4 times, so she hasn't been able to bring a child to term.
Yeah.
So, and then we move on, from that episode, and in season 2, like Francesca and Filavandrel, and they have like their group of elves, and they're basically trying to, earn back the place because they can't, like, it's been taken over. They can't have it. And of course, the Elven persecution has become much more extreme due to, the Scoia'tael. And they, agree to side with Nilfgaard and fight for them. But then, of course, they have, she gives birth to the child that they didn't think that they could have. And then they all of a sudden think that like maybe there's a chance for them that they can, start reproducing and bring the elves back into like prominence. So all they really want is to just get back to Dol Blathanna and just, basically butt out of the war. But Emir uses this as to his advantage, kills the baby and
strings them along,
sends them on
makes them useful in other ways.
Yeah, sends them on the war path. Yeah. So of course we don't know exactly where that storyline will go because they've already changed it in some ways, with Fringilla being the one that recruits them and whatnot. So we'll see what happens. They're still going to be prominent. I don't know if we'll see a return to Dol Blathanna for quite a while, though.
Is that your prediction? Like, if you were to predict what happens in season 3 with the elves and Dol Blathanna being their homeland, do you think they're going to get it back?
I don't think in season 3 now. I don't like if they. I'm not sure. I think they will eventually, but I think that's probably like season 4, maybe at the earliest, because I imagine because kind of things all lead in like, one big event per season as far as like the political game.
Right.
I think season 3, we probably will see the coup on Thaned. That's my guess is like the next big event that we will see. But I'm not entirely sure. That may be a little too early for that even. So,
okay. Yeah, I guess it depends on how many seasons they're planning to do and how much they plan to stretch out the story,
I think Henry Cavill said something about like being on board for 7 seasons, which they could easily make 7 seasons out of this.
Yeah.
I think with some of the big events. I think a more like realistic number though is like 5. So if they like for the book storyline,
right.
So if they do anything after that, it is like going into the game territory,
which could be pretty cool.
Yeah,
like
for sure.
Merging the book and the game worlds into their own, I don't know, separate but inspired cinematic story sounds really cool because the stories in the games are great also. Like obviously some of the side quests and some of the things that happen in the games are based on or retellings of things that happened in the books, because they decided to make a game out of the books and realized that most people hadn't read the books. So they kind of reused concepts, right? But you could still avoid most of that stuff and stick to some of the main story beats, especially when it gets to The Witcher 3 and the events of a grown-up Ciri and what happens in that story. That could be really cool.
That'd be an insane season.
It would be. That would be ridiculously. That would be awesome. Season. But like, yeah, you could turn the main plot line of just the base Witcher 3 game into its own season.
Yeah,
totally. Yeah,
and some of the other ones too. I mean, but yeah, it gets a little crossing wires, and I'm not sure exactly where. We know CDPR and Netflix are in collaboration with each other. So
when here's a spoiler as well. The Witcher 1 picks up with the thought that Geralt is dead, and Geralt is alive again and can't remember a lot of things. And there's this weird, what's going on with that? How come he's not dead? How did he survive? All of that stuff. Which is like, man, can you imagine the cliffhanger on, like, let's say they end episodes or season 5 at the end of the books, right before before the games, and you end on a cliffhanger of like Geralt dying. Like, that's pretty cool, actually.
Geralt and Yennefer.
Yeah, just like boom, dead.
So,
I wonder if people would get pissed off about that. Do you think people would be like, "What? We thought they were dead, but of course they're not, because look, there's another season." I think it's one of those things where you'd have to end with them being killed, and then right at like the last scene of the last episode is a hint that they're still alive. Like one of those, like, oh, but we know they're not going to be dead for real, because how would you do another season? But we don't know why or how. But here's a little hint, like that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think as we progress, we're just going to start crossing wires a bit more of like things you see in the games, the things you see, So I don't know. We'll see what happens there.
Yeah. So here's a question for you. Now that we've kind of gotten through all the description of this stuff, is there, and you understand this stuff better than I do, is there a like magical or metaphysical reason why this land is so beneficial to them or so wanted by them? We know it's their homeland, right? So there's like personal, cultural reasons. We also know that there are magical places in the world. There are places that tend to be a little bit more magically important, right? Like, is there something like that going on here as well? Is it kind of implied in a way, or is it just like, I've always gotten the feeling that there was maybe an implied quality to the land.
I think just because of like how untouched, like it's not, of course, like completely untouched by humans, but just generally like it's lesser inhabited. They haven't like come in to just spoiled, like destroy everything there. Like it's still this beautiful land, like the Valley of the Flowers. And like I said earlier, like so at the end of the Edge of the World story, which they didn't do in the show, but in the book, the Dana Meeb, the goddess, like appears like kind of like she shows up, and like the reason that they are let go is because she tells like Filavandrel to let Geralt and Dandelion go, essentially. Yeah.
I can imagine how that wouldn't play as well for the TV show.
Yeah.
People would be like, really? What? Some magic goddess lady just showed up and freed them? That feels too convenient, right? And by putting that in the hands of Filavandrel, it creates a character decision, which gives us some insight into who he is, which I think plays better on TV.
Yeah, and they want to like, he's very prominent like Elven, and they're kind of character development there of like, having him as like a prominent like secondary. I would say he's probably secondary or tertiary character.
Sure. But up until that point of what we see in the show, he is representative to us of who the elves are. Yeah. And what they're capable of. So it does show a certain sense of like, they are willing to be rational about things. They're not just emotional. They're willing to look the other way, or sometimes they take the high ground, the higher path, that kind of thing. So I do think that's a good decision in that sense. So, but you don't think there's anything magical going on? You don't think this is like, anything touched by humans seems to just inherently be less magical in a way.
Yeah, obviously I could be like forgetting something major, and I'm sure Ben's in here. He can correct me.
I don't know. But what do you think, Ben?
I don't believe that they like explicitly tell you like why. It's just kind of like, the place that like it means it's just significant to the elves. So, maybe it's just, I think it's just more of the idea of like, the untouched or the untainted civilization kind of place. Like, like the same as like Mahakam is like the kind of cultural homeland of the dwarves, and it hasn't really been like touched by humans either, because they were like, yeah, you can keep it,
Yeah, we don't want it. Right.
And I think maybe there's just the idea of like, it's such a bountiful place. Like maybe the being there means that it would be like more fertile in other means that aren't just like, the soil. Like it would be more fertile for the elves, because we know that they have an issue with reproducing,
fertility. Getting back to nature, that kind of thing.
Yeah. But we don't, we know that it's not the case, or at least it hasn't proven to be so far. So,
yeah. Interesting. So, I guess here's another question for you. With the next Witcher game being, I would expect a much larger in scope game, something where we see more of an open world system, more of a go where you want. And with the habit of the last 3 games being bigger in scope as well. So like the scale of The Witcher 2 was like the Pontar Valley. It was very, very small. In The Witcher 3, you get a much larger range of places to go. And then the expansions expand that out as well. Do you think with the events of The Witcher 4 that Dol Blathanna makes sense as a place to potentially include in an explorable world, that kind of thing? Do you think we'll see places like in Aedirn? It's south of where events happen in The Witcher 2, right? And it's east of where events happen in The Witcher 3. But it's close. Like it's very close to where things have been happening.
It would be like a place to like kind of see, because we haven't really like seen Aedirn, like how it's been affected. Because we were in are dealing with like Temeria and The Witcher 1, and then of course, and Kaidwen and stuff in The Witcher 2, and so we haven't like gone that far. I'm not sure, because I know there's been kind of the general idea of like possibly it being somewhere maybe we haven't seen before. So who really knows?
Well, I guess, that really just kind of leaves either going more north, which gets us further from Nilfgaard, unless Nilfgaard at that point in the story has taken all of the southern kingdoms. Or
I believe there's land to the north west.
Yeah, the continent goes east, up and then west, and then up and east is more past
the mountains.
The mountains and where the Witchers live, the Kaer Morhen.
Yeah.
So it probably isn't going to go that way. If you were to go south more, you'd end up deeper into Nilfgaard, which seems weird, because unless the northern kingdoms push back, because there's always a political element to the stories. Yeah. There's the events of the stories always seem to take place in a place that it has some sort of political upheaval. There's encampments from the Nilfgaardians. There's encampments from some of the northern kingdoms. You run into people from both areas. There's usually a hot zone, right?
Yeah.
This seems like a good place for a hot zone, if you think about it. Like,
it is. Yeah, it's very much contested there, and between, of course, with Aedirn and then like Lyria Rivia right underneath it, which would be really cool to go to in a game.
Especially if you're Geralt of Rivia, even though he's not from Rivia, but like to actually go to a place like that and see it, to go to a place like Vengerberg and see it in game would be really cool.
And how it's changed, because it really, obviously it's back and forth between Nilfgaard and Aedirn control.
Right. Right.
So
and a population that's like tired of having to go back and forth and be at war for so long.
And I want, because we don't know what has been chosen as like the canonical ending for The Witcher 3. So, to see, like, I imagine Nilfgaard controls it. Like, I feel like that is probably the canonical winner of like the war.
It seems like that's where it just keeps going.
Yeah. So feeling like that, but then, of course, is it Nilfgaard under series control, and how does that affect things?
Right.
Because that does
nuts.
seem like Ciri joining Geralt along the Witcher path just doesn't, it doesn't seem like it's too happy of an ending for just the Witcher, that's as simple as I can put it, is you don't get happy endings.
It breaks the tone. Yeah.
Yeah. So seeing that, and I don't think a series too cool to kill off, I think, as well. I think she's just too important to kill off. So the melancholy ending of Ciri having to leave to take over Nilfgaard, it's sad for Geralt, but I don't think we're going to be playing as Geralt. So but so I guess we'll have we'll see where that leads as far as that goes.
It does open up one other possibility here is that it's not a continuation of the timeline. It's before the events of the books and the games. We go back in time, like that other Witcher series that's coming out, the other show.
Yeah.
Are we going back to just after the conjunction and the wackiness from, the creation of the Witchers and all of that?
Yeah. Based on and obviously you can't confirm it yet, but based on the fan content stuff that I found of the School of the Links and whatnot, I don't believe it's a prequel. I think it's a sequel that continues after.
Yeah,
because there's so much to build on here too. There's so much, they've hashed out this story along with us to what's leading up to now. So I just feel that's to build off of this already pre-made, the pre-done lore that they've had so far, just seems like the next step that they're probably going to take in an area that, because Aedirn could be an area that we haven't gone to yet. So there's could be who knows what going on there. So maybe the last bastion of the Northern Kingdoms after Nilfgaard takes over. Redania.
Redania.
Thing.
I gotcha. Yeah.
So who knows?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think the hints point at it being later in the storyline. I agree with that. But yeah, man, can you imagine a map that was big enough to include parts of Aedirn, parts of Cadwyn, parts of Temeria, parts of Redania, kind of just the center of the continent, parts of areas that Nilfgaard clearly has owned for a little while, maybe a major city in each. That would be freaking amazing.
It would be a lot, but games seem like they're just getting bigger as far as encompassing areas. So maybe. Who knows? Or, with DLC and whatnot. We went to an entirely different area with Witcher 3 DLCs. Going to Toussaint. So
yeah. Well, here's the other thing that I think is trending in games is the idea that you create a foundation that you can continue to just add on to that foundation over time, whether it's an MMO style game or not. If you have a world where you get to build your own Witcher, your own character, you get to play through the events of the main story, and then every year or two, they drop more content and they re-release the game with the bonus content each time, then it's just constantly something to come back to play more in that world, to continue expanding it, making more monsters, continuing the story, expanding the map a little bit more. The technology of games is at such a, you don't need the games to be more high res anymore. You don't really need them to be more realistic looking. Everything's based around usually some sort of aesthetic design. We're not looking for super hyper realism. We're looking for something that's just aesthetically designed well. And the quality of the games, the number of polygons, the texture quality, the shaders, all of that stuff is at a point where 5-10 years from now, if you made a game as a foundation for just growth over the next decade, it's still going to look good. I mean, Skyrim still looks pretty good for being 10 years old, and that's before a lot of the stuff that I'm talking about really matured, right? So a game that comes out 2 years, 3 years from now could easily stick around for 10 years and just keep getting expansions every year or two.
I mean, the same thing with The Witcher 3. I mean, what year anniversary on now? Like,
yeah,
coming up to 8,
I mean, the
right?
game's beautiful. Yeah, the game looks beautiful still.
So
absolutely. So yeah, it would be really cool if they did something like that. I mean, that was part of my hopes for like Cyberpunk as well. It would just be kind of a foundation they could build on, right? So anyway, I don't know. I guess we're gonna have to see where the story goes with these regions. Where do you think we're gonna go for the next episode?
Well, I mean, we've been talking a lot about elves lately. So maybe we should, like, I don't know, explain them better.
Okay. You get kind of down to the nitty gritty of the elves?
Getting down to the nitty gritty. There's a lot of like prominent elves too, like elven figures. Like, I mean, we mentioned Francesca a bunch, Philibandrel, other like elven figures that are of import. So there's a lot of people to talk about. Plus, of course, you know, elves are divided into two different kinds of elves with the A and she and the A and L. So
cool. That sounds good. Yeah. We'll get deeper into the stories and details about the different elves. Sounds good. You have anything else you want to share? I know you're still waiting for Cyberpunk to drop, right? That hasn't come out yet.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on there.
Yeah. Anything else?
I'm just there recording episodes, I guess.
Yeah, it'll happen eventually.
It'll happen eventually. Yeah, and Witcher Lorecast on Twitter, like usual. Not really a whole lot else going on. I don't know. I might dip my toes into like Elder Scrolls Online. I've been
really
seeing a lot of people.
Yeah, dude.
Ben's been playing it.
Our guild has been popping off. Everybody's been hanging out every night. There've been like 5 to 8, 10 people in there at a time, just kind of hanging out, doing some of the events together and stuff, leveling characters. Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. They've been doing a lot. I joined a little bit. I need to do that more. I've been focused on. I tried out the Skyrim Together Reborn mod today. I streamed that with my son. It's a co-op. It's basically you can play co-op in Skyrim with up to like 8 people. It's nuts. It crashes. It's buggy. It's Skyrim, but it's solid enough to actually work, which has been awesome. It's been really, really cool. So Toasty, you should come join us sometime. Kirby Chew is a big fan of Toasty. Kirby Chew's the name my son goes by. Back when we used to play Sea of Thieves together, he still asks me like every so often, like, you think Toasty will play games with us again?
Maybe. I just life has gotten busy, and so I mean, I worked.
Yeah,
I woke up at like 11 today.
Yeah,
I got home from work at like 4 a.m.
Yeah, I get it. I get it. But you're totally welcome to join us if ever you want to do that. Yeah, another thing I want to dig into is the Elden Ring co-op mod, because that seems really cool to do as co-op as well.
I think you mentioned that last weekend, right?
Yeah,
last week.
Yep. Yeah. I'm going to be doing a bunch more modding stuff, and putting together a new little kind of YouTube series of shows or episodes where N7 Legend and I get together and talk about modding games and what's available and how to make things work and all of that stuff. Yeah. So, look for that on the Robots Radio YouTube channel. You guys know where to find all my stuff, robotsradio.net and Robots Radio anywhere, Twitch, YouTube, Twitter, robots_radio on Twitter. But that's what we got going on. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Chat, thanks for being here. I will be back in about 45 minutes for the Mass Effect Lorecast, because that comes up next tonight. So look for that if you want to join us in about 45 minutes. And that's what we got for this week. So until next time,
stay safe on the path.
We'll see you guys later. Bye, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to the Witcher Lorecast. We'd love to hear about your experiences with the games and the books and the TV series and all your thoughts on everything. Please check out the Robots Radio Discord and follow us on Twitter at Witcher Lorecast.
You've been listening to a Robots Radio podcast. Smart shows for interesting people. Check out all the shows at robotsradio.net.